Cool, and we're live. Crazy days for the both of us. Let me fix my camera real quick. What's up, Roy?
Thank you for sending me the link today.
Yeah. With 2 hours to spare, mind you.
Yeah.
That's a luxury, bro.
No, honestly, last time, I know a few people commented on it, but I probably didn't have the time anyway. It was just, there's a lot happening on my side of the world, and today I could make it work. So I'm glad to do that. By the way, we're going to do our normal thing, but this is going to be a 1 hour segment of Btlg Weekly. There is probably enough news for Btlg to do like 5 hours. We're not going to do that to you guys. So the way we're going to approach it is we'll take a couple of topics that we've already selected. We need to talk Tesla. We have to talk Tesla. Google had a major event today too. I don't know if you caught any of it or the cliff notes.
Nope.
But both of these companies, a lot of news. NVIDIA, we're not probably going to get to. Bitcoin, we're probably not going to get to. Robinhood, PayPal, like none of that stuff. And NBIS, Nebius, we're going to, after this hour, we're going to end this, and we're going to also have a separate hour and a half, maybe, stock tank review. Tanner is going to join us for that. They just had earnings this morning. I looked at the high level numbers. I've gotten through most of the earnings call on the drive back. And so we're going to talk with guys that are bulls on it. I have a position, but it's a smaller position that might just be a swing trade. I'm not quite sure what to do with it yet. Thinking about it long term, but yeah, that's what we're going to do. And as always, in the end, we're going to try to get to those quick hot take questions. So I don't know if we'll be able to fit it all, Tevis, but we're going to try.
Yeah, and then on top of that, since it's back-to-back streams, and I don't want to have dinner at 10 p.m., I have to find somewhere to eat halfway through that. So the audience might be in for another treat, just like last time.
Kava, man. Get Kava. Do you have Kava up there?
Kava? No.
Yeah. I've been trying to get my wife to go there, and she hasn't yet. So, but
also there's this new feature for StreamYard where apparently the comments can now go up. So let me know what you guys think about that if you're seeing the comments here.
Ooh, I do see that. That's very nice. Especially for people that are watching the stream a little bit later. So yeah, there's a lot of news. Where do you want to start, Tevis?
Wherever you want. I'm gonna get, is it okay if I eat? I'm gonna get some food, and then is that fine? It's, yeah.
Come on, bro.
Okay. I won't. Let's start wherever. Tesla.
Yeah. Don't order it yet. You can order it a little bit later. When you guys feel like Tevis deserves it, let him know. If we see multiple of those, then he can eat. And if at the end of the stream you're like, nope, he doesn't deserve it, then maybe during the Nebius talk. So
yeah, it's really fun working multiple jobs and then trying to find time to eat in between.
Yeah, I tell you, I've done so much as far as, and I had a couple of days away, which is nice. But anyway, yeah, Tesla. Even with Tesla, there's so much. But let's look at a couple of these together and talk. Probably the biggest thing is there's some good news, there's some bearish news. It's a mixed bag. The stock, of course, is very volatile. A couple of those pieces. Tesla's Elon Musk says that he's in talks with major automakers to license FSD. This isn't exactly new news. It is a shift a little bit. So in the past, Elon had said that that they're considering that they would look in ways to do that they're open to that's part of the vision and the plan. This is something more, like actual talks with automakers. Tevis, any thoughts on who the automakers might be, and do you think this is going to happen?
I think it eventually will happen. It's going to be difficult, right? Because how are you going to retrofit the hardware that's needed to make full self-driving feasible? So I think that's going to be the biggest hurdle. The licensing part, I don't think is like that. It's like it's software, but you still need cameras. I think Tesla has 8 cameras around the car, something like that, 7 or 8. And the cameras are what dictates, the software decisions. And so that's going to be the hard part, right? Because like, okay, let's just say they do it to Ford. Ford is one of the companies that Ford and Volkswagen are 2 of the companies that like are closest to Tesla in terms of their sentiment around Tesla. GM probably on the other side of that spectrum on that scale. But like, let's say it's Ford. Okay, is it going to be only new models are now going to have all of these cameras? Do the existing models have all the cameras? Do they have to retrofit anything with regards to making it compatible to their existing cameras? Elon's been talking about licensing FSD for, I think, a couple of years now, saying that they're more than welcome to do it. But the talks haven't really materialized, and I don't think they will until they can solve that hardware problem, unless I'm thinking about it the wrong way.
No, so this is, for me, it's not much of a shift. It's like, hey, one step closer to that becoming reality. But in actuality, like let's say it's Ford, GM, doesn't really matter. They announce it. Well, it's like you said, going to take some integration. Now, the good thing is pretty much every automobile manufacturer, aside from Tesla, you can argue Rivian, I guess, too, is very horizontally integrated. So they've gotten good at these sort of partnerships where they can just, okay, we're going this direction. Let's get those cameras from these folks. Let's go ahead and integrate the technology. Let's build an interface for it. But it also takes a lot of testing, a lot of design, and there's still regulatory barriers that are there. I think that this is probably an inevitability. It's one of those things that people underappreciate about the automation of Tesla too. It's not just for EVs. This can work on gas cars too. It wouldn't really work as far as a robotaxi network, but that's not what this is for. And it just gives optionality to a lot of like future purchasers who are like, for whatever reason, they're just not ready for Tesla. They don't want EV. They can't plug in or charge it or whatever. They get a Ford. I mean, like we've talked about the impact of FSD on society. And as they continue to build it out, as it gets more and more real through regulation and through trials and innovation, we're going to see this, I think, almost as an inevitability where maybe in 20 years, it's going to take a while, but maybe in 20 years, it's a rarity when people actually drive, that people kind of do it for a novelty, kind of like riding horses. It's like people used to get around with horseback and, on stagecoaches and stuff. And now tourists do that and rich people. Outside of that,
Right.
So, but it'll take time. And there will be people that are just going to want to hang on to their keys and drive as long as they can. But inevitably, like they'll get to a point where they can no longer safely drive, that they need to give up their keys, and they're going to choose autonomy most of the time in that instance. There's going to be some that won't, just because Elon Musk. Well, the other thing is, this is going to be, I think it seems like a white label service. So as far as, and we'll talk about brand destruction for Tesla, we've talked about it before, but there's a few little updates here. White label services, people don't really care like who actually owns it in the back end. Like very, very few people do, versus status symbols. That is a significant source of brand damage. So,
Right.
But yeah, it doesn't really move the needle for me. Now, the other piece, as far as autonomy, and there's other Tesla news too that we'll get to. I'm going to just read off this quote. In the first week of Austin's robotaxi launch, we'll have 10 to 12,000 of them on the road. Oh, wait, it's not 1,000. It's just 10 to 12 of them on the road. Over the coming month, we'll have thousands. By the end of 2026, we should have hundreds of thousands of vehicles driving unsupervised FSD and part of the robotaxi network. Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a slow start. I think safety is the number one concern, at least to start with. I think, in terms of the car being abstracted away, or the concept of driving being abstracted away, I don't disagree at all with that. But I think that's also something that, I think it's yet to be determined that Tesla is going to be the only winner in that full self-driving space. They're definitely, along with Waymo, but like way more ahead than, GM's Cruise or any of these other self-driving models. And there is significant opportunity for Tesla to license out their technology, similar to how, they're getting a cut from their supercharger network. They can get a cut from the full self-driving, and it just expedites that shift in the technological advancements. So it's interesting. I don't know, Roy, if you caught it earlier this morning when Elon was at his interview. It was like a 9 a.m. I think it was Bloomberg or CNBC, one of those. They interviewed him and they were asking him all kinds of questions. And that was the one where he said, like, hey, we're making good progress. He talked about the brand damage over the past several months.
Oh yeah.
He talked about like how he plans to be CEO of Tesla for the next 5 years, which I think put a lot of investors' minds at ease.
Yeah.
But so if the reason I bring that up is because like if I look at Tesla as an investable opportunity right now, I mean, I've been no stranger to say on this podcast publicly multiple times that my confidence level in Tesla is lower than it's historically been, simply because the fundamentals are not there and you're going a lot off of the promises that management can execute. And they have fulfilled those promises in the past. So it's not totally blind, but it also is not totally based in the actual financials of the company today. Elon said 26 and 27 are going to be significant years to ramp up revenue in a big way. And on the back of that is going to be the robo taxis. Now, June is really going to be a case study in the success rate or the probability for robo taxis to actually manifest over to the balance sheet. If they start with a dozen, it's underwhelming. If one of the dozen crashes and makes headlines, then it's going to be like a massive setback because so many chips are on the table for that June event.
Yeah, the hard thing is like this isn't just it needs to be as good as humans because I think full self-driving, honestly, it is. It's actually maybe slightly better. Autonomy has to be significantly better because people will tolerate to a certain extent human error. But as far as full self-driving, especially because Elon Musk's name is attached to it, but you even see this with Waymo. When Waymo messes up, people make fun of it, they deride it, they talk about how it's a failed technology, and Waymo is doing great. Loops into our Google topic. Yeah, my thoughts is 10 to 12 is a really small number, but you're right. Like it's worse if they do it too fast and then they run into problems and then have to scale things back. That would be a disaster versus this. People kind of expect Elon to be slow. Those targets that he laid out as far as, tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands, I think that's Elon talk. Frankly, that it's too optimistic. But the nice thing is they don't lack for vehicles. Like they have plenty of vehicles, both in what they're producing and what are in people's hands as well. So being able to scale it out once they know that things are working, once they've been safe, I think that they'll be okay there. Now, before we talk about that brand damage a little bit more, here was one other piece of Tesla news. There's some others too, but this is just a further acceleration of the international expansion of full self-driving. We, of course, saw the early reaction, early read in China. Some really, really cool videos out there too. And the cool thing is, like, people hear about it and they're like, yeah, from bears, it's like, it sounds like it's complete trash. You watch Mark Robert's video, you're like, wow, this thing's going to kill people. You hear certain bears and it's like, okay, it's like the worst technology on the planet. And you hear bulls and it's like, this is the best thing ever, the best invention ever. Reality is actually closer to where the bulls are. Seeing is believing. And when people actually get their hands in one, well, first, there's a couple of things that happen. When it enters a new market, if people have not experienced and seen this for themselves, it's kind of like the Waymo factor that there was a lot of demand when they go into a new market with Waymo just because they're like, wow, this is a novelty. It's something new. It's something I want to try. Even if they don't need or necessarily benefit from taking that Waymo, they're like, this is cool. Full self-driving is exactly the same way, but even more so because it's your personal vehicle or a friend's vehicle, what have you. And it convinces a whole lot of people. There's still some that will never be convinced. So this is really exciting to me. And as far as the brand damage stuff, so a couple of things. This is from yesterday. It's actually really close to where I work. I was having coffee with somebody, and it's hard to see, but the lot goes all the way back here. It goes all the way up here and all the way back here as well. This was completely empty like 12 hours before. And I think I saw one Model 3 in here, but all the rest are Cybertrucks and refreshed Model Ys. And I drove around using my Tesla because it's very meta. On the other side, too, it's not like completely full or anything, but I imagine now it probably is close to it. Lots of Cybertrucks, too. And I know that this happens like even when sales are going well and everything. But the reality is the narrative is that sales are not going well, despite what Elon Musk says. He does acknowledge that Europe is very soft. This is from April, so this may not be what May is looking like. But I think that this is where the brand damage is the most severe, is actually in Europe, other than Italy for some reason. I don't know. Norway, too, like they have insatiable EV adoption. but this is a slower growth rate than a lot of the competitors there, and just a significant drop off. And this is not all due to tariffs, maybe a little bit, but just because of brand damage in part. Model Y refresh is certainly a factor as well, but yeah, there's no way you can color the EU numbers as anything but horrendous. That said, I do think that as the Model Y refresh scales out, they'll actually be better than expected as far as sales. And then there was one other piece that I looked at. We don't really have time to go into the coverage of it, but car dealership guy, are you familiar with them?
Right. Yeah. I know that account. Really
Yeah,
great.
so he interviewed a dealer that they do a lot of EV volume through, and he basically said, "Well, what's the demand like? Yeah, for Tesla specifically." And he's like, "Yeah, we cannot get enough Teslas. Anybody that's been selling EVs for a while cannot get enough Teslas." And yes, benefits from the EV tax credit, the $4,500, 4,000, 4,500, whatever it is for the used vehicle, but and they're cheaper. And people are like, well, it's not new. It doesn't really help Tesla. Well, it does because of ecosystem. It does because it's the gateway drug into the Tesla ecosystem. A lot of people's first Tesla is a used Tesla, mine included. And we're looking at being a buyer of a new one, hopefully this year. But the other factor is that really shows you what brand damage looks like. If they have a glut of used inventory that's coming on the market from leases expiring, which is true, and also Hertz continuing to recycle out part of that fleet. There's a lot of cars coming, and there's not nearly enough right now. And people want the Teslas; they absolutely want it. So, is there brand damage? Yes, especially in Europe. I don't think it's as bad as I initially had read in that. As far as the initial reaction, usually that's the case. And yet things are still not great with Tesla. So for me, and I'm curious what you're doing too, I'm just sitting on my hands with my position, very comfortable with what I have. It can go up, down, sideways, whatever. I may add to it down the road, but for right now, I don't feel compelled to.
Yeah, a little bit different on my side. I am slightly reducing. Well, I shouldn't say that because that will get people spinning. But there's a portfolio where I'm wheeling Tesla, and if I get called on my shares in that portfolio, I'm probably not going to be entering more Tesla and cash secured puts. In terms of my actual long term position in my long buy and hold portfolio, I'm not doing anything. I'm just holding it. So overall, as a percentage of my total, my Tesla will be lower, but at the same time, like Tesla is 20 to 25% of my portfolio. It's a massive chunk, and so I'm okay to do that. I think with regards to the brand damage, it is kind of dying down somewhat. Like we're not seeing as much violence against dealerships and all of that ever since ever since the first batch of people actually saw consequences for their actions. We're not seeing that as heavily. And I really think right now it's in a weird limbo state where robotaxi, full self-driving, and later even Optimus are the driving, bull cases. And I want to bring up this comment, when you were still talking about car sales, like, yeah, like the car sales do matter, but you have this massive rift in terms of the people who are buying Tesla stock right now and the people who are selling Tesla stock right now, because a lot of content creators who have been buying and holding for years are now for the first time selling. And I think the discrepancy is that, a lot of people are looking at the financials and maybe calling BS on the story. And then another group of people are like diehards and they always bought Tesla for the story and they're always going to care about the story regardless of what the financials are doing. And so I think that is really, to some degree, some cognitive dissonance where like, one side is doing something saying like, oh, the story is going to be great, Tesla's amazing, even though the financials are deteriorating. And the other side saying, well, actually it's overvalued and the financials are deteriorating. Why should I trust them, to move to this next phase when they can't even actually grow in Europe or whatever the case may be. And so I sort of understand both of those viewpoints. And so I'm not cutting it all together to mitigate my risk. And if I give up some of that upside, then that so be it. I do, in fact, also believe in what you're saying, where the product is good and it speaks for itself. And I'm sure if I got into a Waymo, if I was in, San Francisco or whatever, I would feel the exact same way. I keep watching these videos that people post on X around like their older relatives who are
Yes.
Gen X or whatever the one before that is, boomers, who get into Teslas for the first time and they're just shocked at the ability that this car has to drive itself. And I think that is a really interesting perspective to ground you, because we're so deep into the narrative and we're so deep into like, oh, what did Elon do today? What did he tweet about? That it kind of loses its luster to think about the magic of the technology itself in isolation, and think about how many people, like what massive percentage of the global population has never experienced that and will be completely awe-stricken when they do.
Yeah, and we talked about this before, but real briefly, I took a road trip, 2,000 miles total, almost all on full self driving, one forced intervention and stuff. But anyway, showed off full self driving to my parents, and they were, even though it wasn't perfect, they were so impressed, and they, without me even bringing it up, got it immediately. They're like, "We have friends because they're in their 80s, having to give up their keys because they're no longer safe. This is incredible. This changes lives." They don't want a Tesla just because it doesn't make sense for where they live. Like they can't charge like you would normally have, and they're very remote, both in the winter and also in the summer. But a lot of people have seen the same thing. I've given rides. I gave a ride to a lady at our church that's like 80 something years old, and she was shocked and impressed, and also very nervous the whole time. So yes, you're right. It changes minds, and like the thing is, Tesla, not just a stock, but the actual car is like a cult. Once you are a cult member, you go around and you tell other people about the cult. It's not Fight Club scenario here. I don't know. I have not. I've convinced people to buy used Teslas. A number of people are buying or have bought used Teslas that I know. I haven't gotten any referrals directly from real person interactions yet, but again, it's a gateway drug. And the reason why car sales still matter, I'll throw this up here. Yeah, I do. I have had several referrals. If you guys ever want a referral code, let me know. This right here, we can see non-auto gross profits. Energy is real. Like people were back in here saying, "Oh, energy is not a real thing," and I was like, "Dude, like the ramp is very evident. This is going to be a major part of Tesla, and it's a large enough chunk that if somebody says it's just an auto company, they're an idiot at this point. They could argue that back in 2022, but not now. Now in red, that's services. So energy is the green, blue is the overall bar. Services is very, very small, but services will grow over time. It is lumpy. There's a couple of reasons for that, but they are kind of like the vehicle itself is kind of like an iPhone, where Apple makes money off selling the phone, yes, but their bread and butter is from the service industry and building out that ecosystem, getting you involved into the Apple cult. And so vehicle sales are still very important and fuel this as well. You can look at, well, I'd have to pull that up, overall revenue, but it's other than energy, like it's such a small amount. Vehicle revenue is still very important and significant. And even if Elon Musk hits his targets and hits his number as far as autonomy and licensing, full self-driving to other auto manufacturers, that's still a ways off. It's going to take time. And they still need to sell Teslas, the vehicles. That's their bread and butter. That's their core, and it's going to be important for at least the next 10 years.
Yep, I definitely agree. And yeah, like look, most innovative company on earth. First of all, okay, sure, we can have a conversation about that depending on how you see innovation.
You did sell Palantir, so he is right.
I did also sell that, so I have a habit of doing it. And look, there's a lot of private companies out there that'll blow your socks off. So by calling, Tesla the most innovative in the world, I think that is a bold statement, putting it, bluntly. And then the other thing is like, you got to mitigate your risk, man. You can't be all in all the time. I don't have a 20K portfolio anymore where I can just YOLO into all in positions. Like, I don't want to blow up my account. I've spent years building it. And so, sure, I'm never going to become like rich overnight by, positioning myself this way. But at the same time, like Tesla's been, and like I've posted nearly monthly updates on my portfolio for the last 5 years. And Tesla went from like 55 to 60% of my portfolio down to now being 25%. And I'm probably going to cut it down to like 15%. And 15% is still if you look at the aggregate numbers, that's still way bigger than what 55% of my portfolio was last year or 5 years ago. So
Yeah,
Just a
I
risk
would
management.
personally be pretty uncomfortable with anything more than 10% in Tesla. Volatility, uncertainty. There's a lot of great stuff that Tesla is doing. They even had like a little Optimus update that we won't even get into. Um, but yeah, it's an incredibly innovative company, and they're in many ways a unicorn. Like I don't know if you saw it. Did you see my Joby and Archer Aviation video?
No, it's on. I wish I did. Honestly, it's on my list, but
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I don't
No,
have
I
time
know
to
you've been
have
busy.
dinner, let alone watch videos.
Yeah. So it made me think of Tesla just because Joby is very vertically integrated, which sounds great,
Yep.
but in manufacturing vehicles, you can argue space is a different space, pun intended, and I think it is. So, not including space, but including aircraft, including ships, including vehicles that are on the road. There is one company that is vertically integrated. I wouldn't even say Rivian's there. Rivian has a bit of that though. That's made it work, and that's Tesla. That's it.
Mhm.
And we know because you're a bull. You've been in Tesla much longer than I have. They came this close to bankruptcy. Like it took an incredible CEO, incredible leadership, incredible, insane determination, work ethic, mission mindedness by the entire culture, and I would say a good deal of just timing as far as like things that were beyond their control that worked out in their favor. And it was almost impossible to pull off, and they did.
Yep.
It's an incredible company. Joby is trying to do the same thing in the eVTOL space, and I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, if it works, it's amazing. And we see that with Tesla. They've reaped so many benefits from this as a company. It helps with future innovation, but making it work and the scaling part, which is the hardest part to do for
Yeah.
vehicle manufacturing, including eVTOLs, I would imagine. I don't see why it's any different. It makes things so much harder than what Archer's trying to do, which is they're like, hey, everybody else does horizontal. They partnered with Stellantis, horizontal, 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 except for those core products that you absolutely need as essential. So we'll see which one plays out. There's multiple winners in that space, but yeah, Tesla is an amazing company, but there's a lot of great companies out there, and there's especially at this price level, there's some risk.
Look, one thing I will say with regards to Joby, and I haven't seen the video, and nor do I know that much about Joby, um, but what I do know is about Tesla, and you got to remember that this is a company that's 20 something years old, 23 years old, something like that. They didn't start off vertically integrated. They layered in vertical integration over different phases of their scaling journey. They were completely horizontal to start, essentially having like they started with like a Lotus Elise hollowed out, and they put the battery pack into that. And so
Yeah.
my point is if you start with vertical integration, it's high risk, high reward. It can totally bankrupt you because like there the quantity of difficult problems you're solving is extrapolated. Where if you start with horizontal and then eventually you move to vertical, not only do you gather more information around, okay, where are our biggest pain points that we can have a bigger lift by doing in house, but you also spread out your problem somewhat to say, okay, does the production line operate well as is? Great. Let me now tinker with this specific part. You're not solving the whole thing at once. So that's all I'll say to that. Like everybody praises Tesla for being vertically integrated, but they forget that this is like a 20-something-year-old company.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. And a lot of that vertical integration too was just because it was necessary. No one else did what they needed them to do, and so they're like, "Well, I guess we got to go vertical again." There was an element of intentionality to it, but I think they would have been less vertical if there was an option, just because it makes things very difficult on that front end. So, but yeah, incredible company. It's been a good investment to me. I'm glad that I took profit earlier, and I still have some. I'm happy to do that. That's yes, that's true. And again, like Joby has. So to be fair to Joby, and I think I gave it justice as a video. I hope I did. They've done a lot of things very well, and they're actually ahead of Archer in a number of ways. But if you look at the actual product itself, like back in the day in 2020, 2019, 2018, people did the same thing with like Lucid when Lucid would come out with a product, or Nikola when they lied about what their product was, or Rivian, or there's the Ocean, Fisker Ocean. There's so many of these other ones out there. They're like, look at all these features and things that they have, and it's so much better than Tesla. And in some ways, it was true. It's like faster top speed, bigger range. You had this feature and that feature. Why did Tesla make it work? Because they were able to scale. And that's the number one most important thing is even if you have the better mousetrap, the better mousetrap does not always win if you cannot scale. And Archer is basically not proven to scale, but I would say that they have a lot of advantages there, even if their product is not quite as good. And I don't think it's quite as good as Joby. I think Joby has a better product. They're actually ahead for FAA certification, but Archer is really good at marketing themselves. So I don't think so, Tom. I think that's ridiculous. They have a real product. That's incredibly unfair, in fact.
So before we move on from the Tesla conversation, because it's been half the show, yes, Tesla 1,000 by end of year. I'm with you, Cyber Ninja. Let's do it. I'd be happy for that. Might be a dumb question, but can FSD be on a gas-powered car? Like if it has cameras and if it has a software, like FSD is just a software, right?
Yep. Yeah, there's no reason why it can't.
Roy, you can lead us into this next topic.
Yeah, so boy, there's a lot of Google stuff too, because we're going back 2 weeks ago. I'd love to also talk the Apple, the ad revenue. Do you want to do that first, or event, or whatever? You didn't catch up to the event, so let's do it this way, guys. I did not, just because of my time, the way it was scheduled today. I caught a good chunk of the Nebius results, but I didn't catch the Q&A at the end, and I need to go back and do that. I need to look at the slide presentation as well. And also with the Google event, I basically caught other people's highlights on X. I saw a short video of Sundar. I saw the auto translation technology. I can't remember what it was called. I saw Tanner's takeaway that we're going to look at here in just a second. So if there's something that stood out to you in the Google event, that would be handy if you guys typed it as a reminder, A, or B, if we just missed it entirely, which is very possible. Would love to have that detail as well. So with Google, they showed off some like neat features and stuff, which is like, hey, this is a cool thing that they're working on. This is a nice thing that they're working on. They're so much more innovative than Apple. Apple is just like dead as far as innovation, as far as I'm concerned, for the most part. And their events are a lot more exciting because they're working on stuff. I've been very impressed with them even before the event. They're very much more awake than they were 2 years ago. I think that this AI jolt has forced them to wake up, that they had just assumed search would stay the same forever, web pages would stay the same forever, AI that they'd be leaders in, and it wasn't the case. Gemini is a very credible product. They still have massive amounts of cash and revenue. They trade cheaply based on a pure valuation standpoint. And frankly, the Pixel is really good. Like they're well positioned in a lot of different spaces. The hard thing to me is, well, I'll show this before we look at Tanner's post and what he thought was the most impressive takeaway. So in case anybody needs a reminder, their business is ads. Like it just is. This is a breakdown of revenue. So search, YouTube ads, that's most of their actual revenue. They do have, some from cloud. Cloud is actually doing quite well. Like the other categories are doing great. And this, like at least from what I saw out of Google today, they didn't really launch or do anything that really helps protect their moat as it relates to search. And I think that the reason why that they're trading cheaply is that there's some legitimate headwinds, just partly because of technological shift and what users are, how they're going about search at this point, how they're going about shopping, how they're accessing web pages, how they're accessing information. And then, of course, the regulatory stuff, which we'll see what happens as far as the ad space on Apple or all of that, if they have to divest a chunk of their business as well. I don't know what that'll look like. I mean, honestly, nobody does. So, but they're still innovating. So this is what Tanner took away as his thought. I'm just making sure I didn't miss any mentions on Google stuff that was launched. So personal context.
Mm-hmm.
Personal context, in essence, is Google already has your data. They're like PayPal, but they have your data across a whole bunch of things. And so I would say that Tanner's probably right, that Google, out of any company here on earth, has the most data out of anybody. You might say Meta too. Meta has some pretty interesting advantages there. But I would say, a lot of people that, use Facebook or use Instagram are not using WhatsApp. So, or Llama 2 and their other interactions, Quest 3. So it's a little bit more diversified as far as their data, segmented rather. Here, basically, they're saying Gemini, which is already good. It's already, I would say, maybe top 3, top 4 LLM.
Right.
You can argue which one's the best. It's much better than when they first came out with Bard, whatever in the world that was. Glad that they renamed it too. And so they're basically like, okay, if you allow it, assuming that you have to switch this on, and it can't be there by default. Maybe it can be, but you get into a tricky situation with regulation, especially outside of
Right.
the United States. But regardless, you can say, okay, Gemini, you can have access to my personal data on YouTube, on Gmail, on Google Docs, on the calendar, and so forth. And so when you're asking it a question, it has the context of you automatically. And so when it's giving you an answer, or it's like, hey, I'm looking for a restaurant to take my wife, it knows your preferences because it knows you've been using Google Maps. Actually, Maps is probably the most exciting part of this. It's like, okay, I know that you like this kind of food, and I know that you like this grade of restaurant. Here's a great one for you. And of course, they can monetize that through giving something a little bit of a bump if there's some ad revenue there. But monetization for Gemini is not something that's here yet, other than the subscription layer. And he mentioned, let's see, Tanner said there's one other thing here. So this was his takeaway, and you can react. I think it's an overreaction by Tanner. I think the market reacted appropriately with Google because it doesn't address the core weakness here. But he says, this makes me incredibly bullish on the Google stock, yet the market continues to price them like a slowly dying legacy business. They are so far from it. And this isn't just a personal revolution. Imagine the same level of contextual understanding applied to organizations through Google Workspace and Google Cloud. Google's distribution and advantage here is massive. They have a direct pipeline into users and businesses of all sizes, making it incredibly easy to integrate these advanced AI capabilities. There is a very good shot that Google doesn't just compete, but leads the AI race.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
Yeah, interesting. It's look, Google will not be my first choice to if gun to my head, I'm asked who is the leader of the AI race. But look, they've also come back 180 since Black George Washington, and I think that they're making good progress. I think personal context is obviously something that will be necessary for all AI, LLMs, chatbots, whatever you want to call them in the future, because they're going to evolve from the prompting, based conversations to something that's more dynamic and seamlessly integrated into your life, like a personal assistant across multiple applications. And I think a part of that, this is Dharmesh Shah. He's the co-founder of HubSpot. He was saying in an interview, he's like, look, agents are going to be the new apps. In the past, when you needed I want to order an Uber, I want a food delivery, I want something, I want a timer to focus for 25 minutes, I want to meditate. Like all of these were apps. In the future, you're just going to do these all with agents. And the difference is that agents have the personal context and agents have the critical thinking ability that an app just doesn't have, because you have the underlying neural engine there. And so personal context is going to be very important for all LLMs going into the future, because that's what's going to train the decision-making capabilities that this thing has, right? So Google does have an advantage of that. Grok has an advantage through Twitter. ChatGPT has an advantage through Microsoft. And it's really going to be centralized among a couple of core players from that decision-making capability, that personal assistant use case. And so I think they're going to be a major player. I just don't know that they're going to be the biggest player. But thinking of it from my own personal perspective, like, would I let Google look through all my stuff? Probably, because they already are. Would if Apple looks through everything that's on my phone, and if Google looks through everything that's on my Google workspace, which one would be able to give me better advice? I mean, I could totally see Google winning out there, because everything I do is on the Google, stack.
All right. Yeah, and that's fair enough. Let me ask you, because I know I've talked with Amit and Tanner about this. I don't know if I did with you. Did we talk model context protocol at all?
No.
Given time, I don't know that I'll go into the full thing, but this is, well, you don't have time. This is one of those things that is like the next iteration of AI agents. AI agents is something that leaders were talking about, I don't know, 7 quarters ago, maybe 8 quarters ago. Palantir is one of those. NVIDIA is one of those. Now everybody's talking about that. Leaders have shifted and are talking more about model context protocol, because you're right, context is critical. I'm going to push back on you a little bit. Personal context is good, and it really helps fine tune and make the LLM perform better. Like, this by no means is bearish to Google at all. Like, it is a good announcement. I just don't think it is going to work the way that Tanner expects. And what's really happening behind the scenes is people are running into AI not living up to the hype. There was actually a article that I looked at today, basically Klarna. It's a buy now, pay later company, if you guys aren't familiar with it. Looking at IPOing, they delayed that just because of the uncertainty at the time. They actually posted earnings because they planned to IPO again, and they weren't very good. And maybe 9 months ago, the CEO had come out with this quote that grabbed everybody's attention. And he said, basically, we're done hiring. AI can do all the jobs.
Right.
And now they're like, okay, actually, that was wrong. And that was
They got a lot of backlash.
What's that?
They got a lot of backlash for that.
Well, they did at the time. I even asked Vlad in our interview about that, and he kind of chuckled and he said he hoped AI couldn't do his job yet. But I mean, like, maybe some point it gets there. But bottom line is that they rolled out a product, and it was tough for them. They models hallucinate, and you have to be so careful with that there's a couple of things you can do. The choice that they made is limit what the model was able to do, which is probably a smart move when you're handling people's finance and data like that. And so when people encountered the model as an AI agent, when they were reaching customer service, they were frustrated because they couldn't get to real humans effectively, and the bot was stupid. It handled some things well, but a lot of things it just could not do. And so they hit roadblocks. And so that was one of several factors. I think buy now, pay later is sketchy anyway, why Klarna had some issues. And now they're like, okay, we actually need some real humans here, especially with customer service touch. Fast forward, a lot of companies have made significant AI investments over the last 2 years. There was a survey that came out designed by IBM. So you can say there's bias or not, but I don't think so. And they found only 1 in 4 AI projects, I don't remember the timetable, had actually lived up to the expected ROI. That 75% fell short. And the biggest, there's 2 significant issues that they faced. One is the ability to actually integrate this into businesses at scale. That's something that Palantir absolutely solves. It's not a cheap solution. I'm going to make a video at some point when I actually have time. But there's pretty phenomenal tailwinds actually coming for Palantir, because about 2 years is about, it depends on the company, but 2 years is long enough for people to determine, like, hey, this plan of attack that we're doing, we can't just keep trying harder. It's not working. We need to shift gears. And a lot of times they try to do things on their own and building in-house. Anyway, the other part of this too is that a lot of these companies have tried to make, especially with customer service and customer-facing products, integrate as much AI as possible. And they've run into the same issues as Klarna, where they're like, okay, it's limited on what it can do. And the other factor is AI accesses the web in a very different way than we do. It doesn't need to go on the web page. It goes, can interact directly with APIs, but then you still have issues with it being not able to communicate from one company to another. Internally, yes. Partners, yes. But what if you want to go from, your Gemini thing, and you have all your data there, and book something at a restaurant that they just don't have the technology capability for? You can build out some of that. It's very long. It's very slow. It takes a lot of resources. Or you can integrate what Anthropic basically launched as an open source system. It's called Model Context Protocol, which in essence gives the context necessary for LLMs, most major LLMs conceivably at some point, to be able to access APIs directly and have the necessary context for whatever interaction that API is designed for. So in essence, this is making the LLMs speak the same language that communicates to each other through APIs. And so you can have your AI agent working on one end and the company's AI agent working on the other. They can communicate through the API using the MCP. And as a result, it alleviates, for the most part, hallucinations, especially when it's done well. This is being normalized. And Google, by the way, is not behind in this. They're right there with a lot of the other leaders with MCP as well. Like, now that you've heard the term, you're going to hear it everywhere. It's one of those things where, if you buy a Tesla, you see Tesla everywhere all of a sudden. Even
Yeah.
PayPal is talking about MCP a lot too. So over the next few quarters, look for those words, watch for that. A lot of leaders, it's early enough that people are not just saying MCP to get hype on their stock, and I don't know that would work anyway. But in essence, you don't need the personalized context for AI to be real. That's basically what I'm saying. It does become better. It does improve it, and Gemini is already very good. But there's going to be a lot of competition in this space, and there's so many apps out there that allow you, and these are going to get better too, especially through MCP, where if you prefer to use Gemini or if you prefer to use Grok, I almost forgot the name of it, which there was a major announcement on that you heard this week. You absolutely can, and you can integrate still your Gmail. You can still integrate your calendar without really any issue. It's just like 1 or 2 clicks of a button.
Yeah, look, I think absolutely you can. So first of all, there's levels of value that you're going to get from this, and there's people who, I was watching this clip of like some influencer or whatever. He literally fed all of his life data, like all of his data, financial data, personal data, everything to the AI, health data, like his health, reports. And it was giving him personalized, daily plans as though it was an executive assistant. Like, I think that is kind of crazy to be giving up that kind of data. But at the same time, I also think that's the direction that we're headed in from a personal context perspective, because I can go on Grok in incognito mode and it knows nothing about me, and I can still get value based on what I'm asking for. And then there's so that's the first layer. The second layer is it remembers all of our chat history, and then it references our chat history to then give me context in that very isolated sandbox. And that's the second layer. The third layer is then I tell Grok, hey, look, this is my age, this is my profession, this is where I live, this is what I like, here's my favorite type of ice cream or whatever. And then when I ask it, hey, where should I go for ice cream? It says, oh, actually, check out this other place because I already know what your favorite type of ice cream is. So that's the personal context in the third layer. And then I think everything above that is going to be built in terms of this middle layer through MCP that you're talking about. And it's going to abstract away layers of difficulty. But at the very, very basic, fundamental building blocks, if I have an AI that is portable, that I can choose what I want to feed it. And so ChatGPT, for example, has this, if you go into the settings, it has the command prompt that you want it to have when it talks to you. And there's been several people in my organization, like C-suite people, that literally have pages and pages and pages of instructions around when I talk to you, you give me bullet points, you cut the fluff, you try to keep it down to a minimum. You always have your audience as executive level. So it curates in real time all of the responses based on that system prompt. And so that's also a level of personalized context. And so my point is it doesn't necessarily need to plug into all of my life to provide value, but I can feed it the contextual window of that domain that I'm working in for it to provide that specific level of value. And that can be something that it can interface with another API from the back end, or it can interface from, just the front end. If I'm going to, OpenTable to book a reservation for 2 people at an Italian place that I really like on Thursday night, and it can handle look through my text messages and handle the scheduling data or my emails. And then it can also find the restaurant, and then it can also make that booking for me by just literally going and clicking around. I don't need an API for that, but at the end of the day, I get that task done.
Yeah. I think the biggest issue with this, so actually real quick, I do think Tanner is right. He had a note there on this being I think it was in a response, a very good thing for Android. I think that this effectively wins Google the Android versus Apple. It's going to take a while. The Apple ecosystem is very sticky, but Apple is done innovating Even with partnerships, they're just not going to be able to do what Google's able to do. Not just Google, but Samsung and other providers as well. That's good for Google. But I think that the reason why, I mean, it could be any reason, but Google was actually down today. And the reason is like it does nothing to really address the legitimate concerns about the core of their business, which revolves around search and revolves around web traffic. That's being disrupted. Even if everything else
Yeah.
effectively doubles or triples, that's great for Google. If their core business is being disrupted and they no longer have a monopoly over time, it's not going to go away instantly. That's really rough. And there's a lot of indications that there are. Just some from last week was the announcement from Apple. And, there's legal hearings and you can argue as far as like the reason why that they would say these certain things. But in essence, Apple came out and said, hey, for the first time, I think it's in 20 years, correct me if wrong on that, for the first time in a very, very, very long time, search traffic through Google actually declined on Safari sequentially.
Right.
Yes. And maybe that's noise. Maybe it's a 1 quarter thing. Now, Google did respond, and their response was, yeah, over your entire ecosystem, though, it's actually up. They didn't address, in which, in essence, is an admission that that's the case. They phrase some things, I think, in a certain way just to try to hope that they're not going to lose the Apple business. And that's the other concern, too, is if as a result of this legal proceeding, if the DOJ basically says, hey, Apple and Google, you guys are done. I mean, Google gets back $20 billion or so. Like, we don't know what that number is today. But the reality is Google is not giving $20 billion to Apple out of charity. It's there to protect and defend their moat and help them continue to grow and scale their business. That's a pretty big disruption to Google. Like, short term, yeah, the balance sheet will look a little bit better, but over the next couple of years, that's a really rough thing. So there's a lot of question marks on the core of their business, even though, frankly, like compared to where they were 2 years ago, there's a lot more going right today about Google. It's just the world is changing rapidly. And I don't think this event, from what I saw, there could be something that I missed, and I totally acknowledge it. There's nothing that really addresses that.
So, okay, a couple things really quick, because I know we only have a few minutes left in the stream. First of all, if we're looking from a feature set perspective, Android has won that battle like a decade ago, but Apple people, myself included, will never admit that on a public.
You just did, bro.
I know. Second of all, I think that Google is being priced very cheaply, but it has high upside potential in the terms of if they can actually deliver on their promises and find a way to monetize that. Because yes, like you said, ads are their business. Just really quick, there's about 32% of world population still don't have internet access. So over 90% internet penetration exists in North America and in Europe. But in Asia, there's only 34% of people. There's 34% of people that don't have access to the internet in Asia. And in Africa, 57% of people don't have access to the internet. And so, like, yeah, sure, Google might have hit a plateau, or search engines in general might have hit a plateau in North America and Europe, but there is still 2.6 billion people out there that don't even know what they've never been on the internet. They've never created a Google account. And so my point is like, you're getting something for very cheap with high potential upside that has risks of being disrupted or of disrupting themselves, their own business model as it is. But at the same time, like, I do think that is like, there's two sides to that coin. And yes, it is very bullish on SpaceX. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, this is not good. If you look at their actual revenue, like, you're like, hey, it's fine. The reality is the way that they're able to do that is they're just charging more on cost per click. Now, Google and others as well that are affected. And I recommend, by the way, if anyone is kind of curious about this shift on web traffic and impressions in actual clicks, look at Cloudflare's earnings. Did I mention Cloudflare to you? I know.
No, it was not me.
Oh man.
We
don't have time. But look at it. 20% of the internet traffic flows through there. The CEO is very knowledgeable as far as the shift. Actual volume has not changed, but the way that the web is being accessed has. the way web sites are being accessed has, and that's only going to accelerate. Google right now has been able to make it work by charging more per click. They say, hey, it's just because those are more effective. We have more data. We have AI and stuff that helps it be. We'll see. But if advertisers at some point say, hey, the ROI is no longer there, especially if they're disrupted by losing that huge Apple segment by default, like the trend is pretty clear and it's rough. It's not good. And yes, what you said is true. Like the 35% or so of people, most of those are going to get the internet at some point. But monetizing like their ad revenue, it's not going to be
1,000
meaningful at all. It's not going to be fast enough. Like maybe in 20 years, yes. But we're talking about this being disrupted a little bit at first, and then suddenly more and more acceleration to barring Google being able to pull this off. And it's not as simple as people think, like just monetizing a new service that people have not traditionally paid for.
Right. I don't disagree with that at all. I think, Google has to prove out how exactly this is going to make money. Well, I think all of these LLMs have to prove out how exactly this is going to make money. Like, sure, there's a subscription model for the special version of ChatGPT, but once all of those become normalized to some degree, again, sticking with that commoditization point of view, then all of them are going to have to prove out, like, okay, now how do we monetize? Because everybody right now is in user acquisition mode. The second step is monetization.
Yeah, and that's fair. And Google has a fortress balance sheet, so they are fine. And it's the absolute right strategy to scale first and monetize second. That should be the priority. So their priorities are right. I just, it's hard. It's not as easy as people expect. And there's a lot more competition out there that's very credible. I'm not saying, by the way, for the record, that Google is like going to zero, or even in like 10 years that it's not going to be a top 10 market cap company. It could be. And there's a lot going right for it. I'm just saying, I think it's going to be an underperformer from where people are. Well, not necessarily from here, but people look at the valuation like, this is ridiculous. It's stupid. It should be trading at this and that. I'm saying there's a legitimate reason why it's trading at the current multiple that it's at. And some of it's beyond Google's control. But it's not that the market is just plain wrong here. I think that the market is actually getting this one right.
Yeah. Last question, 30 seconds, just in the spirit of still answering questions. Are you considering buying Google at all?
No. If that was the only thing that fell during the big fall of everything during the tariffs, I would have bought it, at least as a swing trade, but no. I'm neutral on them overall.
I would say same over here. I'd rather buy Amazon, all things considered. Everybody, thank you so much for your time. We're not going anywhere. We have another stream where we're going to be listening to Manuel and Sam talk about Nebius. That's going to be on either of our channels. I pinned mine in the chat. I'm sure Roy is also going to be sharing his link.
Yeah, give me a
and that's going to be starting in 5 minutes. Thank you, Pope Leo. Bless you. And I'm going to be scarfing down food in between when I close this stream and when I open the next stream. So if we're late and or if I'm choking, both of those are on me.
Okay, there's a link, guys. Let me pin it too. And yeah, you earned your meal, Tevis, so scarf that down. And yeah, appreciate you guys being here. I really, one real quick thing, I especially appreciate you guys when you disagree with us and you say so. That helps as far as content. That helps me rethink some things. And there's a lot of things that I've been wrong on in the past. That'll continue to be the case. That's one of the ways I learn. So appreciate you guys for watching. We'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, everybody. See you.